Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when and where you're watching this webinar. My name is JB Fowler, and I'm excited to help you get a better understanding of Domotz and how to get started with Domotz. This training focuses on some of the basics of Domotz service and helps you get started with your first system. While you're watching this training, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our support or sales team. The fastest way to get answers to your technical questions is to reach out to support via email at support@domotz.com. Our sales team can answer your business-related questions, and they can be reached by email at sales@domotz.com. In today's agenda, we'll discuss things like our core value proposition, how Domotz works. We'll give you even some examples. We'll talk about how you create an account. We'll talk about your account info and branding, as well as billing. And then we'll get into things like agent activation. We'll talk about what happens after the agent is activated, such as the network and how you set up the network more effectively. We'll talk about some of the device and the device properties that you see. We'll even get into how some of the network devices can be documented more efficiently. And of course, we'll go over alerting, remote connectivity, and lastly, we'll get into a little bit of an overview of what we'll do in the 201 session. Let's talk about the core value propositions of Domotz. Domotz gets used by many service providers and commercial integrators for network management and monitoring. We help with diagnosing problems that arise on the network, but we also get used for asset management. The way in which Domotz discovers all of the devices that are on the network helps you better understand what's on that network and document that network for you and your customers. We also get used for security purposes. Understanding what's on the network and providing you awareness of how the network is getting utilized helps you when it comes to proactively monitoring these networks for security. Let's talk a little bit about how Domotz works. Domotz is a cloud-based system. We're hosted on AWS. We have multiple databases for redundancy, and we're geolocated to follow common regulations such as GDPR and CCPA. We have tentacles off our primary systems throughout the world, allowing us to effectively improve performance and reliability. That cloud is connected to your local area network through an agent. That agent is typically a software-based agent and can be hosted on things like Windows or Linux. You may also find us on NAS drives. We even have a black box that's available that you can find on Amazon. That agent securely connects to our cloud, and it receives instructions from our cloud that helps it understand what it needs to do at any one point in time. It is also that agent that is reporting back to the cloud any changes that happen on the network at any point in time. The third component of the Domotz ecosystem really is the application. You can find our application on Windows and Mac OS. We even have mobile apps, or you can use us in a desktop browser, depending on what you want to do. It is really the application that is viewing the data that is being acquired in the cloud and as seen by the agent on the networks that you're monitoring. That application helps you not only have visibility into the cloud and all the data, but it's also, as you will see, what allows us to make the secure remote connectivity into the agents from anywhere you are in the world. Let's talk about how Domotz does all this. Domotz really is a tool for you. It helps improve your operational efficiency and generates customer loyalty. So how do we do that? First of all, your operational efficiency is improved by providing you knowledge and awareness of all of these systems that are on the network. It's really that IoT discovery and classification sets Domotz apart from a lot of our competitors. We also help you improve your response time to systems that may be in trouble. How do we do that? Well, one is we proactively monitor and alert you when a system gets into a trouble state, but then we also provide that method of secure remote connectivity into those systems so that you can minimize on-site service calls. We also claim that we're going to help generate loyalty from your customers, right? How do we do that? Well, we believe that if you can proactively monitor the systems and know that something's wrong prior to getting a phone call, we help eliminate that break-fix model and we make it better, right? we believe that the break-fix business model is dying. Domotz allows you to securely connect, manage, and react to any troubled system before your customer knows that that system was even down. In my mind, it's about improving customer service. And all of this is tied together with an easy to deploy and easy to use system with a very nice, clean, and simple user interface. I think the best way to demonstrate some of this is to show you a couple of examples that we have. Let's first and foremost look at this screen. This screen here is what we call our NOC screen, or our Network Operations Center screen. This gives you a holistic view of all the agents that you may be monitoring and allows you to dive deep into each agent. If we take a look at a couple of our initial agents, we can show some things like network topology. So let's just dive into a site here. If we look at this network topology, we can see how a system is configured. We can start to look at each individual system. We can even dive into specific devices and see how these devices themselves are configured and what devices are actually connected to the interfaces of each of these devices. We also can take an example. Let's go look at something like a Cisco SG350 that we likely have on one of these sites. And we can dive into this and we can see how we can do things like configuration backups of each of these devices. So as we start to look at how a system has changed or how a configuration has changed over time, we back that up. This is one of the more powerful features that Domotz has. We do this for managed switches as well as firewalls. Couple of other things that we show. If we look at wireless access points, so let's look at a system like Ruckus that's on site here. So if we take, let's take this site because I think this is a primary site. When we look at a system like Ruckus, we can look at things like system level information about its utilization, memory consumption. We can see things like which clients are connected to which SSIDs. We can even go as far as looking at particular devices to see how much power is being received, right? The received signal strength by a particular device and on what radios and what bands that system is on. We can also look at things like virtual machines. If I typed virtual machines correctly here. If we look at like this ESXi server, we can dive into the details on this particular system and we can see information about the system itself. Looking at information like its build, right, its firmware versions. We can look at physical disks or logical memory partitions. These are the types of power and information that we can grab from endpoints, whether they're Windows-based, Linux-based, or virtual machine-based. Even managing IoT devices such as security cameras are possible with Domotz. Domotz recognizes all the information associated with a particular device and allows you to see information like its MAC address. We'll show you IP address information. We'll show you application layer information that's being broadcasted over the network. But more importantly, we'll discover things like which ports can be connected to these devices for management. And in some cases with AV equipment and in particular security cameras, we can even see the information that's being broadcasted over the network using standard protocols such as OnViv. This allows you to not only see that the system is online, but it also shows you that it's functioning properly and working as expected. When it comes to things like NAS drives, right? Synology is a great example where we can dive into even more details of what's going on inside of that system. Being able to look at all of the simple network management protocol interfaces, seeing things like when upgrades are available, or even being able to look at historical information about how much disk utilization or how these sensors have changed over time. This is some of the power that Domotz has. And lastly, I want to point out one more thing, and that is when it comes to managing devices, a lot of times all it takes is a simple reboot or power cycle to make a system come back to life. When it comes to that, Domotz discovers things like power distribution units or even managed switches with PoE, And we can associate devices directly to these outlets or to these ports, and then we can effectively power cycle them at a touch of a button as needed. You can see that Domotz is extremely powerful when it comes to securely managing all your customers, their networks, and the systems connected to those networks from our user interface. Let's talk a little bit more about how we get there and introduce some of the basic starting setups of Domotz. The first thing that you'll notice is that when you created an account, you had to create your username and password. I'm assuming most of you have done this now, and so you've added in your username. The one thing that I will say about our password is that we do require some strong password requirements. We're going to talk a little bit more about things like two-factor authentication and possibly SSO or SAML, right, single sign-on services, here in a little bit. But when you first created that account, you probably noticed that the very first page that it went to inside of portal.domotz.com was actually this add an agent page. Let's talk a little bit about why that is. Well, in order to take advantage of Domotz, right, and while we're a cloud-based service, you do need to have that software agent deployed into any system or into a local area network that you're choosing to monitor. On this page, you'll notice that there's different ways in which you can install an agent. Most popular is absolutely the Windows agent. It's a very simple executable that you can download onto a Windows system, run that executable. You then can activate that agent by logging into its IP address and port 3000. That's something that you do need to do. If you ever need help when it comes to installing these systems, I absolutely encourage you to visit our help center, which is shown at the bottom of the page, or you can just go directly to help.domotz.com. If you are more familiar with Linux, or if you happen to have one of the Domotz black boxes, which you can purchase on Amazon, then you also can activate the black box. You can follow its help guide that comes with the box, or when it comes to downloading different variations of Linux, or if you're installing a Domotz agent through a NAS drive, such as Synology or Netgear's ReadyNAS platform, or even QNAP, you can touch on these details here. If you want to go as far as building out your own platform through Linux, you can do that as well. The thing to keep in mind is that the instructions are provided on how to do that. One of the things I want to talk about when it comes to the Windows versus Linux versus the black box is all of these systems require that you maintain the operating system and make sure that it's always patched and up to date. When it comes to the black box, one of the things is that we actually have that system running on Ubuntu Core, which allows us to automatically update not only the application itself, but also the operating system, right? The Linux-based operating system. So that is one of the differences that we get, and a lot of people ask about that. When you first log into the Domotz agent and you log into port 3000, you're going to need to insert your username and password. So that's straightforward and simple enough. My recommendation, of course, is that you name the agent as something that's useful to you. After you do that, the Domotz agent takes over and it starts scanning the network. It'll take a little bit of time, but once that you have entered that information, what you will see is that the dot will finally show up on your screen. Okay, you may be a little confused about where that dot is, but we're going to talk about setting that information up pretty soon as well. Okay, while your agent is scanning, this gives us an opportunity to talk a little bit more about account setup. So let's go into that. When you first log into the portal and you've then set up and activated the agent, if you log back into the portal, you now can get to your account page. This is where you can start to set up a lot of the info and the details, as well as the branding about your MSP or your integration company. Here's where you can enter all of your details, your name, phone numbers, billing address. If you want to put in company logo and site information, this is where you do that here. I also want to talk a little bit about the branding page. This is important because when it comes to generating customized reports, which we'll talk a little bit more in the 201 demo, you can do that here. Your company logo, as you can see, I've entered this Cool Cat logo here. You can upload this. This will show up in your reports. You may have also noticed that on my knock page, that the cool cat logo shows up there. This page is often used to show customers how it is that you're actually actively monitoring these systems, and having your logo there, your brand, is a nice added feature that we have added. Okay, one of the things also that I want to talk about on this info page, and you may have noticed it on my account, this is also where you see a lot of information about your payments and billing. I do want to talk a little bit about billing details because we do get a lot of questions on this. One of the things is that Domotz primarily bills based off of credit cards. We bill in advance, meaning that when you activate an agent, that you will be billed for that month that the agent is activated in. A lot of people ask, well, when does my billing date start? I will tell you that your billing date starts the day after your trial expires. So if you started a trial and you've inserted your credit card, you're not going to be billed until until the day that your trial expires. Okay, and then from then on, that is your billing date. It's important to note again that we bill in advance. So any agents that you have available at the end of that trial or at the start of your billing date is what we will bill for. If you activate an agent during your billing cycle, on your next billing cycle, you will see the agent being paid for the previous month as well as this next month as it is activated. So keep that in mind. I will say that if you have any questions about this, please feel free to reach out to support@domotz.com. Okay, one of the things that always comes up as well with questions is around team management. I want to go back to the presentation real quick. So let's go here. I want to show you something about how teams are structured, and then we'll talk about how we set that up. When you created your account, you actually created yourself as a team master. That team master gives you the ability to manage the team as a whole, gives you the ability to view and manage all agents. And then of course, it also gives you access to that billing and the credit card information in there. You can then add team members that are under you. These team members essentially can view and manage all the agents. They can add agents themselves, okay? But they do not have access to billing and they can't manage other team members. So that's an important distinction. One other type of team member that can be entered in here is called a field operator, okay? A field operator can have access only to selected agents that either you as a team master have provided them, or if they have added an agent to your account, they can manage that agent. A lot of times we see people using field operators to provide temporary access to customers if the customer wants to see the Domotz user interface and wants to manage maybe their own site. So that is something that you can do. But it's really these three types of team members that Domotz provides you to have access to. So let's go back and look at how we now set up team members here. Under your portal, you'll notice that there is a team tab in the upper left corner. This is where you can create team members and provide them with access to your accounts or your systems. Couple things you'll note. First of all, if you do add a field operator, you can then come in and edit which of the agents that you want to give access to, or you can remove access from those agents. You'll notice that team members have access to all of the agents. You'll also notice that team members have the ability to provide collaboration. This is a little bit more of an advanced topic, but Domotz gives you the ability to collaborate a particular agent with somebody that is outside of your organization. So if there's a person that is an expert or has a certain area of expertise, you can allow that person to gain access into that particular agent. And again, you can take that access away as appropriate too. One other thing you'll notice, and I think this is where we can start talking about two-factor authentication or some of this other more advanced things like single sign-on services and SAML. This is where you can allow your team members to either be optional or mandatory when it comes to things like two-factor authentication. If you do not use a single sign-on service, which we'll talk about in a second, I highly, highly recommend you use something like 2FA to make sure that it is your team members that are accessing your systems. If you want to set up single sign-on services, you need to go to your account page. And by the way, this is where you can set up two-factor authentication for your own login, or you can come over to the SAML/SSO tab, where you can then use your identity provider of choice. You can see that we have some of the more standard services like Okta, Azure, Jump Cloud. We've added Evo Security recently. I want to also provide an opportunity here to say if there are particular single sign-on services or identity providers that you guys use that you don't see here, by all means, let us know, reach out to support. We probably have ways of enabling SAML easily within that system, but we may need to also add that. So that's just a shout out for letting us know who you're using and to allow us to put this on our features page. So setting up two-factor authentication, setting up these single sign-on services, I think is a critical part to maintaining security within your business. These are some of the basic things. So when it comes to the info about your company, when it comes to the branding, as well as the team management and how you deal with that, those are some of the basics that you need to know in order to have your account set up. Let's now go in and talk about how once an agent is activated, that it starts working for you. So if we go into this Draper site here, when you first activate the agent, you may have noticed that the knock screen shows the dot in a location that is not where you expect. This is due to the fact that Domotz is approximating where the agent is located based off of the internet service provider. If you want to gain a more accurate representation of where that is, you can go into the Agent and Customer Configuration tab here under that agent. You'll notice that when you first open that up, you have the agent settings. This is where you can rename the agent. You also can set SNMP default authentication credentials that can be used on all of the devices that are in your system if SNMP is enabled. To change the location, to get more of an exact location on the knock screen, you need to go to the Customer tab. You'll notice you can enter site owner information. You can enter their name, any phone information. You can even add things like customer ID or contract IDs as appropriate for your scenario. But to achieve the exact location, go down to the site location section, enter the address as appropriate. And once you do that, you'll notice that the information gets populated here and the agent location will be represented accurately on the knock screen. Under the devices list tab, okay, so going back to the primary page, you'll notice we get out of that multi-tenant view where we show all of the agents. We go into this, the network itself, and get an understanding of what's going on there. When you first activate that agent, that devices list tab is really what takes over. Domotz will start recognizing as many devices as possible in the system, and it will start classifying these devices by make, by model, by type, right? The only thing that you really have to do within each one of these devices is to determine whether this is an important device. You also should tell us whether the like the location of the information, right? In this case, this particular switch was put into an equipment closet that was in the first floor, right? Because it's a network infrastructure device, we marked it as important. If this is something I wanted to favorite, I could do that as well. Domotz will automatically go through and classify each one of these devices. And in fact, the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to start recognizing all of the ports that are available for management on these types of devices as well. We'll look for command line ports such as Telnet and SSH. We'll look for web-based ports such as port 80 or port 443. When it comes to endpoints, we're going to look for not only SSH, but in Windows machines, we'll look for port 3389 for remote desktop and management, okay? When it comes to accessing systems, you do need to make sure that we have things like simple network management authentication available on these platforms. By adding in the authentication protocols or the control strings for this, it allows us to get more visibility into the devices and to start mapping out devices, especially when it comes to network infrastructure systems in particular. One thing that I want to point out here is when it comes to discovering of all these devices, and this is just a little bit of a tidbit for those that want to know more, when you are using the desktop application, whether that's the Windows or the Mac-based application, Domotz provides you the ability to export the device list. So everything that we've discovered in that system, we can generate an Excel file for you. The reason that this is so powerful, let's go ahead and save this off, and then let me open up Excel, and I will open up that page and bring it up to the screen. When we save this off to the Excel file, what you can do is then not only see all of the information associated with that particular site, but any naming conventions, any network-based convention that's there, all of the make, model, right? If you want to quickly modify any of these details that have been recognized, you can do that. For instance, let's go look at these cameras that I have in this system. So when we filter by all those, if we wanted to change any information about their level of importance, if we wanted to make notes on these systems, maybe we wanted to put username and password information, maybe we wanted to put some details about when these devices were brought online or when they were licensed, okay? You can do that here. You can do all of that from this single Excel file. And then you have the ability to save it and then import this system or this Excel file back into the system. So that way all those changes can be done for you very quickly and easily. I won't do that here, but I just want to make sure you understand that that is possible here using this. When it comes to proactive monitoring, right? So we've discovered all the devices, we've done all the classification on these devices. When it comes to really proactively monitoring, Domotz provides several ways to receive alerts based on events that occur within the network. So let's talk a little bit about that at this point. A couple things that I'll say. When you go to the alerts tab, one is that you will see that you have this notion of network-based alerts as well as device-based alerts. And then underneath each one of these, you'll see that we have what we call shared alerts and personal alerts. For simplicity, let's talk a little bit about devices and personal alerts first. Okay, I'll just choose this first device here. When it comes to personal alerts, you'll notice that you can have either email notifications or mobile push notifications, okay? When we set up a personal alert with an email, what we're going to do is send it to the account that you're logged in as, and then we're going to, based on the event that occurs, right, in this case, maybe a device going up or a device going down, we're going to send you an email alert or a push notification based on how you set that up. I'm not going to go into great detail right now about shared alerts, but what I will tell you is that we're going to talk a lot more about it in the 201 demo. I also welcome you to visit help.domotz.com when it comes to configuring shared alerts and how these work. What I do want to point out is that shared alerts are extremely powerful. The reason that we call them shared alerts is because you have the ability to take an event or a triggering event and not only push a notification to something like a ticketing system, but you also have the ability to simultaneously push that to a messaging system, something like Slack or Microsoft Teams or even Telegram. And you can even push it to a general email. So if you had something like support@mycompany.com, or if you have another cloud-based service that you wish to subscribe a Domotz webhook to, you can do that as well. Shared alerts are really powerful. They're much more advanced, but I think for simplicity, let's talk now about really just general alerts and the types of events that can trigger these alerts. When it comes to the network-based devices, As I mentioned earlier, you can do things like a device going up or down. You can even do when an IP address changes. I want to talk real briefly about a heartbeat lost. So Domotz is continuously pinging or doing ICMP requests to devices every 30 seconds. That constitutes a heartbeat. If a series of 3 pings is lost, then you lose a heartbeat. What you really, and what is often more important to people, is if a device truly goes down. The way that works is if we receive a series of heartbeats that are lost over a period of time, typically 2 minutes for wired devices, it may be up to 10 minutes for wireless devices, then we will issue a device goes down. This is often what people really care about. Heartbeat loss should only be used for mission critical systems or things like voice over IP systems where audio buffering or video buffering is critical. Okay. When it comes to other types of alerts, and we're going to talk more about this in the 201 again, but you can also do SNMP alerts for devices. You can do TCP port or TCP service alerts as well. So if a service that's running on a particular port goes down, you can alert to that. And then lastly, you can do for each and every device, you can do what we call round trip delay or connection performance alerts. So if the average latency from the point of view of the agent to a particular device on the network increases above a certain threshold, right above a median, you can set an alert on that. Also, if you're receiving a significant amount of packet loss to a particular device, you also can generate an alert on that. Let's talk a little bit about network alerts as a whole, okay? When it comes to network alerts, seeing that the agent has lost connection with the cloud, right? That can happen because of power outages. That can happen because somebody unplugged a cable that they shouldn't have. We can alert you to that. We also can alert you to things like new devices being discovered, right? Or TCP ports or UPnP ports being open, whether it's from the outside looking back into the network, right, through the firewall, or if it's from a device making a request for a UPnP port to be opened up so that it can have access to the network. We can alert you to those types of things. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about the details of that in the 201 training. We also can look at things like when your LAN configuration changes or if your public IP address changes. This could be an indication of a failover, or you know, if somebody's using 2 or more ISPs for redundancy, when that IP address changes, right, that public IP address changes, you should probably be notified of that to understand why that router or why that IP address changed. And then of course, we also do speed testing. So for your ISP, your internet service provider, we can do network performance tests, and we can look at the average upload or average download speeds, and you can generate alerts on that based on particular thresholds. Of course, when it comes to an alert, right, reacting to that as fast and effectively as possible is really, really important. Most issues we know can be resolved remotely, and we can do that through our secure remote connectivity and management. So how do we do that? Well, you'll notice as well that there is this remote connections tab, okay? I mentioned before that when we discover all the devices that are on the network, we also look at which ports are available for management, whether they're command line based or they are web based, or even if they're things like RDP, okay? You have the ability to connect to those. Domotz gives you the ability to do direct connections right into each one of these. So in this case, with this managed switch, if I hit connect to port 80, what we are doing is creating a secure connection from my laptop to the cloud, and then from the cloud back into that local area network where the agent is communicating directly with that device. And we're showing that through this type of proxy. You'll notice that our URL is unique. This is unique to my laptop, so you cannot copy that and use it to gain access to this system. Even if I have a colleague that's in the same local area that I am trying to make a remote connection, they cannot do that because it's unique to my system, okay? You can see now that I'm inside this page of this device. I can go in here, I can quickly set up or make changes to whatever configurations I need to do. Even if I wanted to go in and do a factory update, do a firmware update, or if I needed to save off, the running config versus the startup config like I showed before, we can do all of that remotely and securely directly to that device. Now, sometimes you may not want to make a connection directly to a web port. One of the things that you can do as well is you can create custom connections. So if you know of a particular port or TCP service that is running that you want to make a connection to, you can insert that port here. You also can create what we call a TCP tunnel. So if you knew of a specific port number, just making up a port here, right, 5175, and you wanted to create a connection to that on this particular device, you can do that. It's a temporary connection that only lasts for 60 minutes, but you'll notice that when this connection is created, that we give you another unique URL and port that you can then use to access this system securely and effectively over that port. This is really useful when you're using third-party tools to communicate with devices over this cloud connection. So keep that in mind as well. I'll close this here since we don't need it. Now, one last way in which I want to show that you can connect to systems. Most service providers are going to be familiar with this, but this is through what we call VPN on demand. A lot of times a service provider will utilize the router or the firewall to create VPN connections, and that's all well and good. But what Domotz allows you to do is take the agent that's sitting on that local area network and turn that into a VPN host. And then once you create that secure connection, okay, I won't do it now since we're on this recording, but once you create that tunnel, you can then get a configuration file that you can then use your VPN client on your PC or even mobile device. Right here, we've offered up things like OpenVPN or TunnelBlick if you're on a Mac to gain access into that system. By doing that, now your mobile device, your laptop, now looks like a device on that local area network, and you can gain access to all of the devices or IP addresses that are out there. This is a very powerful way to allow you to do more debugging or just remote access in general if you need to do updates to multiple devices at the same time. Last thing that I want to mention here when it comes to remote management. So I showed this before, but when we look at a particular site and we look at the managed switches that are on that network, you'll notice that in this case, it's a PoE switch. You can see that we have devices connected to these actual ports, and we can see that PoE is available to these. So if for some reason I needed to power cycle this particular camera, I could absolutely do that here, okay? If I wanted to address it that way. I can also, okay, if I have a power distribution unit, so something like this Middle Atlantic device here, where I have associated devices on my network to these outlets, I then can power cycle these here automatically. By doing this, it will allow me to just quickly reboot or power cycle these systems remotely. As an engineer, I don't find power cycling to be the best way to solve problems, but if you need to quickly get a system up and running, Domotz allows you to do that, whether it's over PoE or over a power distribution unit. This really covers much of the basics for effectively setting up an agent for simple remote monitoring and management through Domotz. We have shown how your account can be configured, how an agent gets activated and starts discovering the network-based assets, how you can set up alerts for proactive monitoring, and how you can remotely connect to each and every device for configuration and management. Discussed in the 201 session will be things like reporting and logging, network diagnostics and performance, as well as network security. Furthermore, we'll touch on managing all of your agents and even being able to search across all of your agents for particular devices or systems. We'll also cover in more depth topics such as device sensors, right? Using SNMP or TCP to get more information out of devices. We'll talk even more about advanced alerting, how to configure shared alerts, as well as how to deal with alert digests and snoozing of alerts when you may need to pause alerts because you're working on a system. And lastly, we'll talk about setting up of services, things like external management solutions and documentation service, and getting the most out of Domotz with some of the tools that you use every day. Thanks for your time today. I hope you have a better understanding of Domotz and what we can do for you and your clients. We're there to help you be more efficient and be a hero for your clients and customers.